Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Scheming, the Place North podcast that gives property folk a platform to talk about three schemes they think about a lot. I'm your host, Dan Whelan, Deputy Editor of Place Northwest. Today I'm speaking to someone who, over the last 20 years, has formulated a model of development that ensures his company leaves a positive impact on people, places and the planet. From Glasgow to Winchester, today's guest is active across the country delivering homes and offices and exemplar places. Joining me to talk about the three schemes he thinks about a lot is Peter Connolly, Chief Executive of Igloo Regeneration. Peter, welcome to the pod.
It's nice to be here.
So, before we get into the three schemes, at time of recording, it is the 9th of June, which means we are fast approaching the end of the first half of the year. So I want to hear your reflections on the sort of 6 months or 5.5 months so far. I think people entered the year with quite a lot of optimism, new government saying a lot of the right things. How do you reflect on the last 5.5 months?
I think there's still a lot of optimism around. I think there is a sense that things are in a process of change, but change is taking longer than some people thought. I always knew it was never going to be a position where the new government was going to go in place and a year down the line we were going to be starting to build 300,000 units a year across the country, because I just knew that was a very stretching target. But policy is moving into that way of assisting companies to meet those goals. So I'm still optimistic, but I'm an optimistic sort of person anyway. So probably I've often been accused of having some optimism bias, but I still see all the music that's coming out of central government and the local authorities that we're working with is on the same agenda, which is trying to enable communities to be built more quickly, and also that is a very people-focused process, that is very much focused around strengthening communities, not imposing things onto communities. So all that language still fills me with that level of optimism. But there's a long way to go and a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and that's very much in line with your ethos, isn't it? Your company's ethos in terms of the footprint model that you have and bringing residents along the journey with you. For anyone who doesn't know or isn't aware, can you just touch on what that's all about and where that came from?
Footprint's been our kind of methodology since Igloo was set up 20 odd years ago, and it really sets about to put people, place and planet at the heart of everything that we do. And it's not just a process that we pick out for a handful of exemplary schemes and put them on the front of our brochure. It's something we apply to every single project that we do, that the show across 6 themes that relate to those key titles around people, place and planet, that we're performing, in our opinion, ahead of the market. And we have it independently verified once a year by JLL. And we have an external footprint committee that hold us to task that we are achieving those things. And what that does is it makes sure that the places that we create are really focused around being better for the planet, better for the communities that they're trying to strengthen and serve, but most important, better for our customers in terms of the kind of home that they want to move into, or the kind of workplace that they want to work at, or if they just want to go and sit at a cafe that we've developed and have a cup of coffee. We feel like we're trying to make the world a better place. We don't get it right all the time. There are things that we learn from along the way, and that's the whole beauty of our footprint process is that learning loop that we put in. But we put as much focus on the social impact of our schemes as we do on the financial returns. And at each stage that we're seeking approvals to progress to the next stage of our project, we take as much reticence or account of the social impact of the scheme and the social impact it's going to have on the community as we do on the financial return that's coming out of the other end of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting and obviously fantastic as well that you take this approach. It does sound expensive, it's in terms of if you're delivering such a high quality product, especially if we take, for example, the planet arm of the footprint model. That the sustainability and embedding sustainability into a scheme comes at a premium, doesn't it? And you have, and How do you make it stack up, basically, is my question. Other developers don't do it.
There are things that you can do which the market can enable you to do without necessarily spending a lot more money in the first thing. So I think there are things that you can do that would put you ahead of the market, ahead of what building regs want you to do, by just making careful selections around materials, and they don't cost any more money potentially. So thinking about the embodied carbon in the products that you're using within your building is a key thing for us. So we have a lot less embodied carbon in our homes than a traditional house builder. And that's because we're able to select from a broader range. We're not in a process of having a series, a set number of suppliers that you've driven down on price. In order to get to the exemplar on that, which would be a truly zero carbon scheme, then clearly, there is a price to be paid for that. But in the rank and in most of our product, we're performing well ahead of the market without it necessarily costing us a lot more money. We are lucky that we work for certain clients that look at zero carbon as being an absolute requirement and are prepared to forego some commercial return in return for that. So it's almost like we're able to use those as prototypes, and then the learning from that we can employ and use in our more market-facing products. But I would certainly say that in the development market there are that's probably a generalization, but there are two types of developer. There's the volume people that are constantly looking to drive down on price because that's how they make their pricing, and there's a they do a really good job in producing the houses they do, and the market that buys from them really loves that kind of housing. In order for us to survive as a small medium enterprise, we've got to have some niche about our product, and our niche is around footprint, about people, place, and planet, and trying to create places that are better for the communities that live, work, and just want to go and enjoy there, but also better for the planet.
Yeah, I'm going to challenge you slightly on that, because I don't think that the people who necessarily buy the homes of the volume house builders do love those homes. They buy them because really that's what's on offer, right? If there were more igloos and more, situs and more other developers that you would put in that second category that you spoke about, I think people buying houses would be a lot happier to have more of that kind of choice. Would you agree with that?
Potentially, yes. I mean, there will always be people, it's a bit like the choice of car that you drive, isn't it? At certain times, there will always be people that want to drive, that don't make decisions about the kind of place that they live within because it's they want to make a particular statement about themselves. But there will always be a certain number of people that would say, actually, I want to live somewhere different, and I don't think it's any surprise that those companies you mentioned that are all trying to do something better are generally regeneration people that are building this type of housing in urban centres.
Yeah.
And in that way, applying that kind of logic that I was saying, that you're trying to do something different and you're trying to create a market is not a market that competes with what the volume house builders are doing. So I think there is space for everybody in that market. But I do think if you look at the majority of people who buy a home, the vast majority of people who buy a home don't buy a new home anyway. They buy a house that somebody's already lived in, and then they want to make it personal to them. And what we're trying to offer is something that competes with a market that's actually looking to create a home that's a better place to live, and something where they can have their own identity in that place that they live in.
Yeah, no, fantastic. As you know, on today's podcast, I'm going to ask you about 3 schemes. The one that you're most proud of, the one that got away, and the dream scheme. So, without any further ado, let the scheming commence. Peter, the one you're most proud of. So in your career, you've worked on loads of schemes. We've already spoken about some of them already. What's the one you're most proud of, and why?
As I said in the note, I would say that is the Ousburn scheme in Newcastle, and the mailings in particular. And the reason I'm most proud of that scheme, and it was quite a difficult one to think about, really, because there have been a few.
Well, that's good.
But I think the thing about that one is that it just grew so organically from some very early engagement with the community, and there was this almost symbiotic process of the community telling us what they wanted and what they would like to see happen. And for us to sit there and say, well, actually, if we do that kind of thing, it might make commercial sense for us to do it. And they got ideas about the kind of housing that they wanted to deliver. They took us and showed us something called the Tyneside Flat, which is where a row of terraced housing, but a different family lives upstairs to downstairs, and there's 2 front doors to the street. One family gets the front garden, the other family gets the back garden, but there's a horizontal split, and we kind of varied that and built these duplexes where you had living space, bedroom space, and then with both 2 staircases a staircase down to the street, which went up to another bedroom space, and then living space above, and then a roof terrace, so everybody's got external space. And it became the first iteration of a house type that we use quite a lot around our schemes, and it kind of developed a different way of bringing dense urban living, but been able to provide single family housing as well instead of multifamily housing units. So that was a really quite important thing. The other thing that people were saying to us was they wanted to know more. They wanted to know their neighbours more. They wanted to feel that their places were more independent and different. And so building into the scheme opportunities for people to get to know their neighbours, to get to interact with them. We put some mini allotments in. We put a feasting table in, which was used as a kind of picnicking site, and families still now use that for birthdays and special occasions outside, or just a family barbecue. And it was one of our most successful schemes where we put a community fund in place where every resident pays a small amount of money into a fund. Then the residents come together themselves and decide how they want to use that money. So they use some of it to provide equipment for local play areas, but actually some of it they used into having a New Year's Eve party. But it's a way of getting the community to know one another. And what was most rewarding about it was when we did the post-completion surveys of customers, more than 80% of the customers that we interviewed, we did get to interview everybody that's moved in, but more than 80% said they actually knew more of their neighbours than they had done for any house they'd lived in over the last 20 years.
Wow.
And we thought that was quite a strong statement to make about the kinds of communities we were trying to make.
Absolutely. I mean, it's quite interesting. Were you surprised that the community said that they wanted that? Because, and I know that these are different sort of locations for housing, but if you think about your typical volume house builder site, you have your house, and then you have your garden, and you have a fence around it. And if you look at it from above, it's just a big mess of fences, and people walk out of space, and they don't necessarily want to, speak to their neighbours, or have no interest in it being a community kind of feel. Were you surprised when people said that?
I don't think surprise is the right word. It wasn't what I was expecting to hear because of for the reasons that you just said, but sometimes that's the beauty of, we do our community engagement process, and we're very careful to try and reach out to as much of the community as we can and engage different age ranges of people. And we do all of that before we've even, this scheme in particular, we'd done it at the bid stage. So before we even really started any planning, design or drawings, but I'm in that stage where I'm never surprised by what I hear. And actually a lot of the time, this community is really stating the obvious back to you, and you kind of sit there and think, well, actually that kind of makes sense, and I don't understand why we've not done it before, or why we've not thought of that before. But yeah, I don't get surprised by it, because most of the time but you almost kind of, it's almost the opposite. You're almost taken aback by the fact that you've perhaps missed something that was so glaringly obvious.
And for those who don't know the scheme, so it's located beautifully on the edge of the River Tyne in Ousbourne. It's sort of red brick. It does look like quite a dense scheme, but there's certainly not a tall one, is it?
No, it's not.
And you mentioned there about the sort of the innovative way that you achieved density there, and that's something that we're going to have to do more of, I think, isn't it? If you look at the government's housing targets, do you feel like we're good at density generally in this country?
No, because I think we feel that density means you've got to go taller and higher. And I feel that what the mailings does, and the schemes that we've developed, we've developed another scheme across the river, across the Ousbourne, called the Low Steam Bays Yard, and we're also in for planning on 2 more schemes there actually on up on Malmo and Spiller's Quays. But the thing to me is that we think that you've got to go higher, and actually better use of spaces, and really thinking quite carefully about being as precious about the spaces between the buildings and how that each of those are used is quite key to me, and so that everybody, even though it's quite a dense scheme, there are still communal facilities. Everybody has a dedicated either garden or roof terrace. Everybody's got their own external space as well, and I think that's it's not quite, but it's absolutely vital to me to do. All the homes have got a dual aspect as well, which I think is another key point. So I think that there are tricks that we did in the design, and the architects were very good on that. And a company called Ash Sakula, in bringing that density to that site in a way that best use the site, because quite often you find that by the time the engineers have had control of the site and they've put all the roads and everything in, you're not left with much of a development platform.
Yeah.
And we thought about the whole thing holistically and how we were going to generate the right number of houses that we needed for the viability that we wanted on the site, but also those spaces for people to meet and communicate. And you would, the beauty of it is when you go onto that scheme, and previously there was planning permission for a tower on there that didn't have as many homes in as we built on the same site.
Oh, wow.
But I can guarantee you that you would go onto that site and you wouldn't think that there were 76 homes there. You would actually feel like, well, I can see a few homes and I can see spaces between, I can see people, but you don't necessarily think you're in a very dense urban area.
Well, it sounds like you've struck the right balance, to be honest. And do you think with the Building Safety Act and high-risk buildings and anything over 7 stories, we might see more of this kind of gentle density? We might be going down that route more and more. That might be a benefit to.
I think it's the way the market will inevitably go, and I think there are lessons that we could all learn from this kind of scheme that generates the numbers of houses that the country needs on some key sites without this desire that everything has to go higher.
Fantastic. So the Mailings, Oosburn, check it out if you haven't already. A beautiful looking project. Let's move on to our second scheme of the day, Peter. So the one that got away, or the one you wish you had done. So people interpret this in different ways. So it could be a project you were involved in, but that never came to fruition, or one that you were not involved in that you admire and would love to say was one of yours. So what have you gone for?
I've gone for one of ours that we developed more or less ready to start on site, but then in the financial crash of the late 2008, 2009 was one of the ones that didn't get built out, which is a scheme in the Cathedral Quarter in Derby. The reason I wish we'd built it out was because the area is still underdeveloped in that city, and it's still crying out for this kind of housing development. And it was very much housing and workspace hand in hand with ground floor retail. The designers themselves won loads of awards and actually featured on the front of various brochures for Homes England and what have you at the time as the right way to deliver city centre regeneration. But for a range of different reasons, it kind of stalled. And other schemes were able to go ahead, but that one wasn't. The other reason is that I live in Derbyshire. Derby's my local city, and it would be a great place to have done that kind of project over in the years that we've gone ahead. I just felt like at the time the architects we were working on were the same architects that we used at the Oosburn, so Ash Sakula. And their approach to the housing in particular that we were putting in there was so interesting and new and novel that I think it would have set a template for city living. We were talking about a centralised biomass boiler to heat the scheme. It was all naturally ventilated offices with attenuated windows and stuff. So it was a really clever piece of design. It was, at the time, it was really ahead of its time. And I do wish that we'd had that chance to deliver that scheme out.
Would it still work today, do you think? If you took those plans from 2008 and said, right, we're going to do that today, would most of it be?
I think there were things I'd change. I probably wouldn't be going around centralised biomass. I'd probably be going for the air source heat pump systems that we use at the moment. But I still feel like the layouts, some of the lessons that we learned in the design about the way that the wow factor of what a place feels like when you open it, your door, and you what do you look out to, what is your view out, how the space are laid out so that there's a bleed between where you cook and eat and then live, but also the mixture of workspace, cheek by jowl with that, with really quite cleverly thought through, naturally ventilated workspace would have been quite interesting. So I think there's a lot more that would still, be current today. But there are obviously over a period of time there are things that change.
Absolutely. Tell me a bit more about what was included. So how many units was it roughly, and how much workspace? What types?
There was about just under 50,000 square feet of workspace, about 35 homes in different, mainly apartments, and then about 20,000 square feet of ground floor retail space. So quite a nice size of scheme, and it would have been quite an important thing for that area of Derby at the time, but it didn't happen for various reasons.
Any sort of might it come back? Have there been any memories?
Parts of it got delivered by the council themselves. So some of the workspace got delivered. So I was pleased to see that they took on parts of the scheme and delivered parts of that. And I still think that the area is crying out for that kind of more mixed use approach. So it's one of those where I do keep an eye on it, and it would be great sometimes, because I travel a lot from Derby as a station, and it would be great to be, instead of travelling out to work elsewhere, it'd be nice to actually be doing some stuff on my hometown.
Brilliant. So also I wanted to ask you about another one potentially that you view as one that got away, more recent. So there was a competition run by Manchester City Council for the redevelopment of Wythenshawe. You were underbidder on that. Muse won it. Muse win a lot of these sorts of competitions.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you got the news that you hadn't been successful there?
Gutted. It's the only way to put it. We put a lot of time and effort into it. You don't win them all. You've got to look at your competition. We knew we were up against a stiff competition in Muse. They do a lot of great work, and they were always going to be difficult to beat on this one, and on this occasion we didn't manage to get there. But I did feel that our approach, there were a lot of ideas that we got in our proposal which we thought would have made a massive difference to that area of Manchester. And we're desperately keen to do something in Manchester. We employ a lot of people in the city, and our office base is here, but we haven't really done much here since some of the stuff we did with British Waterways 10 years ago. So we are really keen to do some more in the city. We're just doing a scheme with the Crown Estates in Knutsford, so we have got a presence in the northwest, and we've always done work in Liverpool, but we'd really like to do something in Manchester, and Wythenshawe would have been perfect and ideal for us. We didn't get it, so we've got to go and try and find something else.
Yeah. Can you shed any light on sort of some of the elements of that scheme, just sort of some of the ideas that you had?
I think our ideas of the type of housing that we were wanted to do in there were really good. We partnered up with a really good operator for the retail area who were doing the scheme in Sale.
Okay.
Altered Space, who were absolutely superb. So I really thought that we'd got some really good ideas to re-engage the community in that. I thought our community engagement ideas were really good, but also I think Muses were as well. I think they scored really well on that as well. And in particular, I think it was some of the ideas we'd got for reinvestment back into the community of creating kind of almost like a social impact fund that could actually make money available back to the people, the families that live in those houses. We were thinking that that overage could have been reinvested back into the scheme to provide holidays for families that were living in those areas. So there were some of those ideas that we thought
really interesting,
were really good. Maybe not the easiest things to put out in a podcast, but there are. But it was some of those ideas around the social impact of what we were doing, as much as the physical space we were proposing to develop, that we thought were really quite strong in our bid.
Well, we look forward to seeing it on another scheme.
We've learnt a lot from putting those proposals together, and it's one of those things that's always a really key process about the development world is to develop that thinking and those ideas, and make sure that on future things that they're engaged with. And also, I think, one of the things that we may need to do is to pair up with other SME developers in order to win these larger schemes in the future. So we've just put in a proposal in Liverpool with Urban Splash that we're really excited about. We'd really like to win that. Can't say too much about it, but I think, we're also working with GKRL, which is the Kajima Generate joint venture. So I think that those sorts of relationships are things that are strong. And maybe in hindsight, if we'd have done the Wythenshawe bid with a partner, it might have been in a stronger position.
It's really interesting, isn't it? And the lessons that you learn, and readers of Place Northwest will be familiar with the scheme in Liverpool that you're talking about. But yeah, I suppose you spend some money and you spend some time, don't you, coming up with these ideas, and then ultimately when you miss out, it would be easy to think, oh, well, what a waste of time. But like you said, when else would you sit down and thrash out these quite innovative plans that you can then, all right, you didn't get them for Wythenshawe, but you can then put them into practice elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it's not a waste of time, is it? Although it hurts when you don't. When you don't win.
I memean, it's been a year and it still hurts because we didn't win Wythenshawe, and it was really painful because you just invest personally so much into these proposals, and you believe passionately in what you do. That's one of the things that is quite special about the Igloo team is just the passion and time and effort that we put into these projects, and the thinking, and it's really important that when you've put that amount of passion into something, that you just don't let it wither and die just because you didn't win that particular project, that you take those good things that you've put together and those good ideas, and this whole idea of long-term social impact from schemes that we originally thought of for that particular bid, I won't keep mentioning, but we're now starting to roll that out and think, well, that's something we should be putting into all of our projects, and trying to get local authorities alongside us, investing their proportion of that overage alongside us back into those into communities.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings us on to the final scheme that we're going to talk about today on scheming, the dream scheme. So if money was no object, what project would you dedicate your time to?
Well, I think this is going to nail my colours to the mast, really, as a lifelong Man United fan. But as money is no object, then I think that the position that you'd want, or the job that you'd want to be doing, is the regeneration of the Old Trafford Stadium and that surrounding area. Some of the vision that I've seen coming out of the club and the images that have gone out to public consultation look really quite interesting and exciting. But I think it's really important that the whole regeneration project is run and done in the right way, and involves the community in making those decisions. And it's a broader community than just the people who are going to turn up every other Saturday to watch football. It's all the people that would benefit from that scheme. Everything that club does, and a lot of the clubs that are in the Premier League, the leading clubs in the Premier League are international projects, and so it brings a real opportunity for focus on the city of Manchester generally, and to do things in the right way are absolutely crucial, and focusing around as much as the built environment of the places that people are going to live in and go watch football in and have leisure time in and work in. It's making the best use of the spaces around those buildings, which I don't think we always get right in our cities, especially in some of the regeneration that takes place around the edge of centres. We often don't really think practically enough about those. And then also just a passion, man. I mean, I was once offered the job of property manager at Manchester United, and turned it down by David Gill of all people, which was quite an interesting long story. There was one over a beer of another time of day, but one of the conversations I had at that time, and I met all sorts of people at the club as part of that, including Martin Edwards, who was the chair at the time, was just trying to sit down and explain to people running football clubs how atmosphere in grounds works. There's a lifelong kind of Ciantic odor, you kind of know what makes atmosphere in a ground, and quite a lot of the stadium developments that have taken place today have lost the atmosphere of these famous old grounds like Anfield, Old Trafford, and St James's Park. And if you look at some of the more modern stadiums that are built, they lack that atmosphere. And I won't name names, but I will say probably the one that stands out as a modern stadium that seems to have generated a really good atmosphere has been as Spurs, Tottenham's ground.
Well, I think a lot of time and effort was put into how you would generate the atmosphere there, wasn't it? With the very steep stands, they're as steep as you can legally go in this country, I think.
It's to do with the acoustics in the ground. It's to do with where roofs are placed. It's the steepness of it, and it's also where you put the corporate seating, so that there is a connection. It's where Wembley gets it wrong with that band of corporate seating around the centre of the ground. They get that wrong. But to me, it's kind of this linkage, and we've got some experience of doing this in Sunderland, which is how you make better connections between the stadium and the people that are going there to visit, because there are people milling around Old Trafford going to the museum. It's a big tourist attraction in the city already. How you grow that as a venue, but actually make it of greater value to the surrounding community, and make better connections back to the city centre itself, but also into places like Salford and into Trafford and Sale, to make those connections around so that the broader community benefits from that investment that's going into that area.
It's such a massive project, isn't it? There's so much potential. It's almost paralysing to think about. There's so much to be done there, and so much pressure to make it right. What, as a fan though, what do you've seen the images, you've heard the rhetoric. What do you make of what you've heard and seen so far?
I think that what I've seen of it so far is the ambition is there to make this a truly international stadium and an international sporting complex with a range of different uses around it, which to me is absolutely vital to it. So I think some of the images I see excite me. Some of them I do think, if they get that wrong, it could feel a little bit of a almost like a concreted over area. You know what I mean? It's there's a touch around some of that stuff that they need some careful work. But what I would say so far is that ambition to create something that's truly world leading is the right sort of ambition to have for it. And the other thing that I think is good is that it's brought the city council and the football club and others together to try and do something which is truly kind of special for Manchester, which I think is really important.
Yeah. I mean, a lot has been made of the ownership at Manchester United with the Glazers and then Sir Jim Radcliffe coming in. How confident are you in the current ownership that they can make a success of this project? Because as far as we know at the moment, it's a £2 billion project there or thereabouts. They don't know how they're going to pay for it yet, and they also don't have the land they need yet. So what do you make of sort of Sir Jim and the Glazers and the ability to deliver?
I probably need to be careful what I say, but I think whoever football clubs are funny things, and people feel very passionate about something that is almost disproportionate, but because I feel that the ownership of a football club, those people are really just custodians of that tradition, of that name for a period of time, and then people come and go and what have you, and it's the fan base that club has got, and it's the same across. It's not just about Manchester United. It's across all of these great clubs. That many of them are in our area in the northwest, but there's a greater sense of ownership around all of that than the people who are actually making those decisions. There are some things which I kind of sit there and think, if that was my decision, I wouldn't be doing that. I think I don't understand some of the decisions that are made, but I'm sure that they're making what they think are the right decisions for the reasons that they think are best. And I'd hate it for people to be sat there criticising why I do running Igloo in the same way that the scrutiny that they're held up to. So it's very, very difficult, really, you know, it's very difficult to come up with a model of ownership where the money's all going to come from the fans, because this has changed. I mean, I was reading something over the weekend where I think the price that was originally put on the club when the Glazers bought it out in 2005 was about 600 or 800 million pounds. I can't remember now the figures right. And now we're talking about something that's 4 billion pounds. You know, the numbers have just gone astronomical, and you're almost in a position where, well, who could ever afford to buy and own a football club that's worth 4 billion pounds these days?
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Unless you're a state, you know,
Exactly.
they're the ones who see they have the money. But
Exactly.
the final question on this is not about the new stadium; it's about the current one. What would you like to see happen to that? Because we saw recently Everton made the decision to keep Goodison Park for the women's team, which was, you know, widely welcomed, but very different scenario because Everton are moving some distance away. Manchester United are planning to build their new ground right next door. So what would you like to see happen to your beloved theatre of dreams?
I think if something new gets built, then inevitably it means that, you know, what would be worse is if the thing just ended up becoming dilapidated and falling down. So I think Everton's choice of turning it into a smaller stadium that's used for hosting women's football games would be really good. But in general, if they can't think of a use for it, then they are better to see it redeveloped for some other use. If you think about, you know, I mean, I don't think that the new Emirates Stadium, Arsenal's ground, is one of the greatest stadiums going for atmosphere reasons and stuff. But actually, what they did to Highbury is a really good example of how you can regenerate these places and something that keeps the history of the old ground, but redevelops it in a way.
It's essentially a residential scheme in the footprints of the old ground.
Or commercial, because you've obviously got the railway line through, which makes so a mixture of residential and commercial would be good. And but master plan with the overall stadium development in mind, and with the focus point being the new stadium.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's a massive project and one that we're all very excited to see come forward. Peter, thank you so much for scheming with me today, and thank you all at home for listening. That was the last episode on season 2 of Scheming. A huge thank you to all the guests who have joined us, and I hope you've enjoyed every single episode. We might see you for a season 3. Who knows? Thanks very much for listening.